I am so glad y'all were here because you guys needed to hear that, I'm sure. Is that ego that just deflected and put all that out there? As Pat and I were talking about this, and we were talking about some content, you can see why my phone rings at 7:30 because he is nonstop. This is just a snippet of what we do on a daily basis. But I'll tell you what, he challenges me to think in ways that I never would, because he thinks totally differently than I do. He thinks twice a day. I'm not up to that standard yet. I'm exhausted with half a thought. But he pushes me to think about things in a different way. And Paul has been a guy, how many of you know the Apostle Paul, know anything about him? That he was, I would say back in the day, matter of fact, I would even ask you, what do you think he would look like today? If we had an Apostle Paul today, I mean, he was a bad man. I don't think he's a dude that many dudes would mess with. But what I did do is I reached out to him. Work with me, all right? Smile. It's fictitious, but work with me. I reached out to him on behalf of Pat, because Pat is he's a Paul guy. And I asked Paul, can you show up? We're doing this little conference thing. And I think he's doing a sequel to a movie he just had come out. I don't know what it was, but he said he couldn't be here. But what he did do is he's a letter guy. If you follow Paul, he's a letter guy. He said, I'll do you one better. I'm going to send you an email, and I want you to read it. He's into technology now, too, which is kind of cool, because he didn't need James to transcribe this for him. He just sent it to me directly. All right, but I wanted to read to you what Paul sent me. All right, and if you want to argue with him, remember what I just told you about him. He kills, well, he did, killed Christians, and he had no qualms about it. So here's his challenge. This is a letter from Paul to the officials, and he says, I, Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ and called upon to be an apostle, send greetings to all of my friends, you, the officials. So greetings. Say hi to Paul. He may be watching somewhere. All right? And he says, I respect the difficult job that all of you have and the heavy responsibility you bear in each game. Believe me, I can relate to delivering unpopular messages. I can relate to delivering unpopular messages to different crowds of people and then end up taking abuse and being persecuted for it. In my second letter to the Corinthians, I talk about embracing this suffering, because in times of calamity, this is when I depended on God's strength and mercy the most. Therefore, I am well content with my weaknesses, with insults, with distresses, with persecutions, with difficulties, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. I urge you officials to be strong in your suffering. And like I told the Romans, bless those who persecute you. That's a tough pill to swallow. Now let's be honest. It's just us here. It's a circle of trust, referees, right? We can all trust each other. Yeah, that one's going to be difficult, because have you ever worked at West Virginia? That's persecution of another kind, trust me. But bless those who persecute you. Bless and don't curse them. This applies to players, coaches, fans, and even management. The next time you think, I can't believe he actually said that. I'm going to have to replace that. Replace the traditional meaning of the F word and use forgive them. Are you tracking with me? Okay, we'll leave that go. Paul's our friend on the edges from time to time too, all right? Change the culture and let the change begin with you. That's what we're here doing, right? He goes on to say, now on to pressing matters. It's been brought to my attention that just like the Corinthians, there are quarrels among you. Officials have always argued over rules, and sometimes rules need clarification. So allow me to clarify. And I know some of you are obsessed with citations, so I'll include those too. All right? He says, let's talk judgment. Referees, we're graded on judgment, right? That's what we're critiqued on. That's where we're evaluated. So let's talk judgment. Officials pride themselves in their judgment. The problem comes when they extend their judgment beyond where it belongs, which is the legality of the game, and they start applying it towards judging other people. Listen, I was pretty clear in Romans 14. Therefore, let us not pass judgment on one another any longer, but rather decide never to put a stumbling block or hindrance in the way of a brother. You see, judgment leads to gossip, like I told the people in Ephesus in Ephesians 4:29. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as good for building up, as it fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. The next time you find yourself in the middle of gossip, look to people up, lift people up instead of tearing them down. Quit trying to hinder people. Change the culture and let the change begin with you. He could have ended the letter right there. He didn't. He kept on. She said, now let's talk about coveting of one another's status and schedule. I know referees, this really doesn't apply to us either, does it? Right? Oh, come on now, you got it. Are you with me? Yeah, it doesn't apply. Yeah, it absolutely applies to us. Glad you're here, not just me. The Galatians had the same problem. I said in Galatians 5:26, let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another. Officials need to realize that they are in this noble profession and advocation together. Here are multiple citations for you. Romans 12:15, rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. 1 Corinthians 12. If one member suffers, all suffer together. Well, sometimes that's unavoidable. You know what I'm talking about? When one goes down, we all go down. So we've got that part probably pretty well. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. We're probably lacking in that one a little bit. Start looking at all things collectively. Stop the selfishness. Change the culture and let the change begin with you, with me. He ends it this way. Now I want to address stories of extracurricular activities after games. Y'all still with me? He didn't mention anybody by name, so we're good. And I'm not talking about video breakdown. From my letter to the Romans, I said, let us behave decently, as in the daytime, not in carousing and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and debauchery, not in dissension and jealousy. Instead, clothe yourselves with the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for desires of the flesh. Officiating, and he gave me a second page here. Officiating is indeed a fraternity, but that doesn't mean it has to be Animal House. Change the culture. Let the change begin with you. And he closes. I know I have given you a lot of things to accomplish, but remember this, Romans 8:31. When then shall we, in response to these things, what then shall we say in response to these things? If God is with us, no one can be against us. Listen, God is with you. God is with me. And as I shared with the Philippians, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. P.S. I will address the reports of less than accurate expense records. With less than accurate, he had to include that. As well as a list of various things reported missing from locker rooms across the country in my next letter. Peace, the Apostle Paul.